Today we're going to be talking about how to finish raw edges on non-fray fabric. Specifically, we're going to look at cork leather. Cork leather is considered a non-fray fabric. That just means that its edges don't unravel or separate. However, for cork, it is usually backed with a cotton or a cotton polyester blend, and that fabric can fray, especially after prolonged use. So we're going to look at today how to finish up these edges. So if you have a wallet that's bumping around in a pocket or a purse for a long enough time, you can keep its edges looking nice and neat instead of having this fray to it. This is a piece of cork that I've had in my scrap bin for a while, so we're going to use it as an example. You can see that the backing here is starting to fray just a little bit, and we're going to look at ways to fix that. The first thing we want to do is to get rid of these frayed pieces here of the backing. Now you can go through and clip them with scissors, but they will just come right back. So what I like to do first is to take all of my raw edges and just use a lighter and just run the flame along the edge, and you can see it just takes that right off. Okay, now a lot of my pieces I cut on my laser, so that burns the edges for me. However, if you are cutting by hand or using a cutting machine, or just have some pieces that don't fit in your laser bed, you can use this method. Now this works for a time, but eventually, if it gets enough wear and tear, those edges will come back. So let's look at some other things we can do. There are a couple options for the next step of protecting your edge. The easiest and simplest way is to just use a fabric glue. I like to use this fabric fusion. It's not overly sticky. It goes on nicely. This will just protect your edge. It's kind of like a fray check, just with a little more power, and it will just protect that fray backing, or the backing edge that can fray. What I like to do is I like to, well, if I can get the top off, there we go. I like to just run a thin bead along the edge. It's going to be left raw. You don't want to get too much because we're going to spread this out. And once you have it kind of beaded along the edge there, I use my finger rather than an applicator and just smooth it along the edge. Now you'll notice as I'm doing this, a little bit is going to get onto the front surface of your piece. So you want to keep a cloth handy to get that off. So I just have this scrap piece of flannel here, and I just use it to wipe off that front edge. And you want to make sure you do that while it's still wet, or else you're going to see it, whoops, on that front edge. Okay, that's off the front edge now, but it's still here, or the front surface, excuse me, but it's still along the edge. Okay, so easy as that. It dries clear, it dries pretty quickly, and you can move on with getting your pieces together. You will still see your edge color, so your backing color. Sometimes it's a more beige color, sometimes it's this black, depending on what color cork and which company you bought your cork from. So that will still leave you seeing the color of the backing. Their next option is a little more involved and takes a little more time, so let's look at that. The next option in protecting your raw edges is to use an edge paint. I like to use Giardini. There are other options out there. This is the first one I've tried. Honestly, I really like it, so I haven't felt the need to look at others. However, there are others out there, and I know they have good reviews on those as well. When you're edge painting, you're going to need to do it in multiple steps. First step is to put on a base coat. I have this base coat dense here. I put at least 2 base coats on depending on the thickness of my edge, and I'll tell you, I'll get to that in just a minute. But once you get your edge coat on, or your base coat on, 2 to 3 coats depending, then you're going to put your actual paint color on. Again, you can do multiple coats on this depending on how you need your edge to look. There's also a third step you can take, and that is to put a clear coat on. I don't have any of that. I've never actually felt it needed, but it will help with something that I will show you here in a minute. There are 2 options, at least with Giardini's paint, is to get a matted clear coat or a glossy clear coat. So you can look at those if you wish. When doing edge paint, you're going to need an applicator, such as this. If you're doing a lot of edge painting, if you're batch painting, I have this tool here. It is a reservoir that you can pour either your base coat or your paint color into, and then it has this wheel that spins. So you could just take your piece and just run it right along the wheel, and it coats that. So that's really nice if you have a lot of edge coats or a lot of edges to paint. Because you can just pour your paint or your base coat straight into here. I only do it if I'm doing a lot, mostly because I don't want to pour in more paint than I need and then try to put it back into my bottles or have it wasted. So let's talk about our edges for edge painting. This piece that I've been working on here is just a single layer. A lot of times when you are going to be making a wallet or a bag that are going to have a raw edge, you're going to have multiple layers together. So your option is you can paint them all single layer. That will take a lot of time. You can paint them at the end when you have all your edges together, or you can kind of do a mix and match of that. This is my Everly wallet, and for this particular one, let me see if I can zoom out just slightly here so you can see the piece better. I painted it midway through sewing. With this piece, you can see here I have 3 separate edges that are each painted. This main body edge is 2 pieces of cork put together, and then there is this zipper pocket in the middle, which again is 2 layers of cork. Once this clutch gets put together and folded around, there would actually be 6 layers of cork. Here at this edge, 4 layers, and then 2 layers. So it would be a definite steps in that. Now you are very welcome to paint it all together so that you don't have these individual edges showing. However, I tend to like a smaller edge to paint as opposed to a really thick edge to paint. It's harder for me to get a consistent, nice looking edge if I'm painting a lot of edges all at once or all together. Now you can do it, you're gonna have to use a little bit more base coat and a little bit of sanding and make sure everything's covered well. So for me, I like to do really no more than 4 edges or 4 layers when I'm edge coating or edge painting. Now, when we're talking about the clear top coat, you can see that this has had a little bit of wear right here and along that edge, just from where it bumps against stuff. A clear coat would probably help keep that little bit of smudge and dirt off. This is going to be my new pattern that will be coming out. And this, again, I did, you can see, so this piece is again just 2 edges put together. Then we have 3 layers here and 4 layers here on this middle part. So you can see the difference in the thickness of those layers. My 4-edge layer here is about as thick as I want to go. My 4-layer edge, there we go, is about as thick as I like to go. So that's up to you. You can experiment with that how you want. I'm going to show you how to apply the paint, and I'm going to use this little card holder here since it has multiple edges to look at as opposed to this piece we were using earlier. We're going to be looking at this gift card holder. This is one of my school bundle gift card holders. It's the book portion, and I'm going to specifically look at this because, let me take this card out. It uses 2 pieces of cork here, so you see it has a 2-layer edge, but my 2 pieces of cork had different color backings. This one had a beige colored backing and this one had a black colored backing. So you can see that difference there. I'm honestly not too worried about this because in my mind, this kind of looks like a book. These would be the pages. But in, say, a wallet, you might not want to have that multicolored backing look. Sorry, it's not focusing in there. So we're going to specifically cover this edge. I will go all the way around just for consistency, but we're going to look specifically at this edge. First thing we're going to do is to put our base coat on. Let me shake that just a little bit. So you want to get your paint edge applicator here. And because I'm only doing one thing, I'm just going to dip my applicator tip into my bottle here. If you are a person who doesn't like to dip into bottles, you can pour a little bit back out into a little small container. And then we're just going to roll the paint along the edge. So you can see this is covering my raw edge in a nice layer here. You want to try to get this as even as possible. And while it's still wet, it's okay to kind of go back over, but you want to do that quickly because as it dries, you'll start getting stickiness, and then that won't look good. So you just continue along your edge, getting it as even as possible. I'm going to come down to the bottom and stop there just for demonstration purposes. Okay. And as you can see, maybe, there's a few little places here that are slightly thicker. This is why I said you'll probably need to apply more than one coat. Another reason is, as you can see here, there we go, the fabric will kind of absorb the edge paint just a little bit with that first coating. So going back over it again will help get a consistent and even coating that hasn't sunk into your fabric and protect it a little bit more. All right, so we're going to let this dry and then we'll come back to it to get our second coat on. My first coat is dry now. You can see that the way I let my edges dry is I actually clip 2 sewing clips, or however many I need for the size of the project, and just stand it up on that. Now this can leave marks if you have it in there for too long, so use your judgment on that. There are lots of different things you can buy that will help hold it up. If you don't want to do that, you could also just kind of prop it up off the edge or off the table. That also works as well. So I'm going to try to show you my first coat here. You can see how it's not exactly even in the thickness along the edge. You can see it's a little thicker here, then it gets a little thinner. There's a couple places over here as well. You can see how it's just not quite even, which is why we want to do multiple base coats. So between your base coats, kind of run your finger along the edge. Right here, it feels a little rough, especially right here where you can see it's a little thicker. What you can do is you get a really fine piece or a small piece of really fine sandpaper and just kind of smooth those edges down a little bit. I actually have another rough one there. I don't know if you can see that little burr right there. I actually have this old fingernail file that works really well for me. So you can see that burr. I'm just gonna get that off of there. And just smooth it out. And we'll go back over that again with another layer. So I just go around my edges. Again, you can kind of see where it was thick right there. Doesn't have to be perfect. This will help smooth out and ready your edges for your next coat. So take a scrap piece, make sure you get any of the dust off. If you're going to be doing a lot of this, make sure you use protective equipment, a mask or some sort, because you don't want that dust flying up into and getting into your lungs. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to just, once again, go along this edge. And this time it should go on a little smoother because you have that first coat. And just keep smoothing it on. When I do my second coat, I like to, before, especially if I'm not doing a very big piece, before it dries, I go from one side and just, I got a little dry actually. I like to go from one side again just to kind of make sure I don't have any really thick pieces. Especially if you have corners or curves. You can see how it's not quite even here. So I'm going to go through and kind of just try to even that out as best I can. Okay, so once again, we're just going to let those edges dry, and we'll come back and see if we need a third coat or if we can move on to our paint color. Okay, my second base coat is dry. You can see that the base coat, unlike the glue, will not dry clear. So that's why you'll want to not use this by itself, like you might use the glue by itself, and you'll need to put a color over the top. You can kind of see here, I'm still a little thick right there and kind of right here along this edge, but I have a nice, smooth, even coat. I don't think I will need a third coat of the base coat. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of, those thicker pieces, just smooth those down just a little bit. This will also roughen up your base coat just slightly, and that will help the paint go on and stick just a little nicer. Okay, you don't want to rough it up too much because you'll be able to see that through your underneath your paint if you do too much. All right, so I'm pretty happy with this base coat here. This is only 2 layers of cork. If you have a third or a fourth layer, you might need a third or a fourth base coat. But we're going to move on to our color now. So I'm going to use this pretty green. Since I have a green book cover. Most of the time, I don't actually use the paints as they come. I mix them. So I have just some little paint containers that I mix my paints in, and I use a small, just little metal scoop and stir them around until I get the color that I want. But for today's purposes, we're just going to go straight with this green. You're going to put the edge or the paint color on just like you put the base coat on. Again, since I'm just doing one, I'm just going to dip my paint applicator straight in and go right along the top. Just like you do with the base coat. Now you'll see this is going on nice and smooth. It's a little thin. I might need to shake it up a little bit more, but that's okay. If we need to put a second coat on, we can. So it goes on so much smoother than your base coat because of the base coat, and just glides right along the edge of your piece. So I'm going to go ahead and go around the rest of it. We're going to let it dry and we're going to see what we have. Our color is dry now, so let's look and see what we have. You can see my color is nice and smooth. It looks even. I don't have any thin spots or missed bumpy spots there. All right. I'm happy with that, so I'm happy with one coat. If you have some thinner spots or you're using a darker color and you would like it to be just a little denser, go ahead and put a second coat on. Again, if you have more than 2 layers of fabric, if you have 3 or 4, a second coat might help make things a little more consistent looking. If you did a good job with your base coat, the base coat is the most important part of edge painting, then a single coat of color is often enough. So really, get good at that base coat and then you won't have to use as much color. But if you can remember, this gives that edge where I had the two different color backing a very consistent look. It gives it a nice finished overall look. And it's one more way to finish your raw edges of your cork. At this point, if you want to put a top coat on, you're going to apply it the exact same way as you did your base coat and your color and allow it to dry. Make sure you don't have any unevenness or any lumps once that's dry. And there you have it. Those are the 3 ways to finish a raw edge, which is burning the edges, which I always do first, even if I'm going to go on and finish it in another way. Adding glue to the edge, like we did with this piece here, or adding an edge paint to your edge. I also have a blog post on this topic if reading through the steps is easier for you. The link is in this description below. I hope this video helped, and thanks for watching.